Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of the Midwest Gaming Classic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Garris, Panel Director of the Midwest Gaming Classic. Have you ever wanted to play a brand new retro NES game just like you were living in the late 80s or early 1990s? The VGBS Gaming Podcast is back at the Midwest Gaming Classic, and this time they're talking about the current NES Homebrew Revolution. With over 500 brand new Nintendo games out there that many of you haven't heard of, and games coming out all the time, they're going to talk about our favorites and go into details how you can join in on the fun. And you know what? Enough of me talking. Why don't we get to the podcast?
The Nintendo Entertainment System has enjoyed a revolution with homebrew games in the past 10 years. In this VGBS podcast, Jeffrey Wittenhagen and Kyle Gilbert join us to discuss that revolution.
So I'm Jeffrey Wittenhagen, this is Kyle Gilbert. We run VGBS, there's kids present, so we won't spell out what the BS stands for. But we all know what it is. So I'm Jeffrey Wittenhagen, I'm a published author. He's about to tell me that I need to eat the mic like I'm doing this right now. It's a little weird, but I'll make it work. So I'm a published author. I'm actually today right behind everybody with the Overdrive Reality guys. I have my book set up. I've done an NES Collector's Guide, Super Nintendo Collector's Guides, which I do have a couple copies left. I think we're down to 6 total.
They're going quick.
They've been going quick all convention already. They were selling before the convention opened. It was crazy. I was just sitting there drinking beers last night, and people were coming by, hanging out. So I do a minimalistic collector's guide as well as a personal stories Super Nintendo guide by contributors all over the world. Pretty cool. And then we do VGBS. So go ahead, Kyle. Tell about yourself.
Yep, I've been playing games since early 80s, pretty much since I could play games. Working on, the high score runs, the no-death runs, just trying to get good at anything, that type of thing. And then we started the whole podcast, and it pretty much began organically from us just bullshitting all the time.
He spelled it out!
Yeah.
Couldn't help himself.
Right.
Couldn't help himself.
Yeah, it just kind of dovetailed, and we figured we might as well do a podcast from it.
Exactly.
And then that's just kind of how this whole thing unfolded.
Yep.
So yeah, you really do gotta eat the mic, though.
You really? You really do got to eat the mic. Yeah. That's right. So basically today we're going to talk about the new NES Revolution. So typically we're going to talk about a little bit about the homebrew scene and those talented developers, but also I'm going to jump into the microcosm of collecting the NES again after all these years and why it's blown up and why people are getting back into that nostalgia and jump into the microcosm. So if anybody else wants to speak up too, we're just gamers like everybody else, so feel free, raise your hand, you can come up and talk too, absolutely, feel free. Oh, yeah. And we're recording, they're recording, you can come on, it'll be great. So basically with the NES, it's the 8-bit, obviously, the 8-bit microcosm, it's the third gaming generation. Second gaming generation was the Atari 2600 era. Before that was the Pong era when the arcades started and everything started. So in that third era, why, Kyle, is it the NES? Why is the NES the thing that we go back to? Is it just because we happen to mature at that right exact perfect time, or is there something else behind it? What do you think?
Yeah, and from what we've talked about too on the cast, so you have the whole soundtrack aspect.
Yeah.
So you have the NES ushered in an actual soundtrack to a game instead of just one, like loop, a 20-second loop or something on like Atari or whatnot.
Which are few and far between, like River Raid 2.
And that's the other thing, it was like special. So if you actually got music on the Atari, it was like, oh, cool, They,
Pitfall 2!
Yeah, they like went the extra mile, So, and then it was a little more advanced than your ColecoVision and your 7800. Yeah. But yet it wasn't so far that you couldn't use your imagination.
Yeah.
So you could still unlock that portion of it
and
see the game through your own mind's eye. and then also just kind of live through the game as you're playing it. And I think that whole magic is what spawned all that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And where you're going with this, too, is that you have the music piece, you have the art piece. I have a lot of artists that completely go back to the NES because you can take those pixels and make it your own artistically and make a nice, full art piece. It kind of transcends entertainment, even. Because when we're collecting Nintendo, it's not only something that we can just put on our shelves, it's not something we can, like, just look at and interact, but we interact with it. You get to play the game, and every game is a different experience that you play, so it's something that transcends it. And we've had people tell us that, oh, all of a sudden after 20 years or 30 years, you're going to just move on to the next thing. And I think that some of these certain games and systems we're not going to move on from because of how it transcends and does something differently than the other types of artwork do. So, I mean, have people moved on from Atari? Sure, but there's still diehards out here that are going over to Tim over here that's over at the table and getting the Art of Atari book, because it's an amazing book.
Yes.
Those things and the different microcosms and aspects that go with those books, we can look at it a million different ways. So I have 2 different Super Nintendo books, 3 different Nintendo books, because you can literally look at it 100 different ways and come up with cool, ridiculously verbose ways to cover just the NES. It's insane.
Yeah, and the whole art aspect is huge. It's kind of like in the 80s with the VHS, too. And like a lot of the art from the old movies and the old games had that hand-drawn, like, beautiful paintings, and it just, again, it unlocked your imagination.
Yeah.
And even before you played the game, you were already excited, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, that sometimes the game didn't live up to the expectations of the box art. You thought, and it's the same with the movie, though, but then there's that beauty, too, where back in the day we couldn't go online and find out.
No.
You had to just rent it and see for yourself.
Exactly.
And that's a whole nother crazy thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the interesting microcosm, is that before the days of the internet, we literally had to go by what we knew, what Nintendo Power told us about the NES. Yeah. We were only subjected to what we were subjected to. So even in certain areas in Milwaukee, they had different games available at the rental stores, as we did in Northwest Indiana, or somebody did on the East Coast or the West Coast, who had certain stuff that was distributed differently. So their experiences and nostalgias are going to be different. But we all come back. And one of the things that we were talking about recently is that Nintendo is basically a giant toy company. Like, literally, Mario and Zelda were on bed sheets and pillows. I have a trash can with Legend of Zelda on it from the 80s. Like their marketing was just like we currently see with Pac-Man. Like, they were putting it out there, all over the place. Yeah. Exactly.
It's in your head. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, so you thought about it. Yeah, that's the huge thing, though, because you don't know what you don't know, and that's another thing we say a lot in the cast. And
yeah.
You have to put it out there, and if someone doesn't realize, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
It's just they don't know.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think a lot of that, even with having your own band or your own project, too, that getting it out there is the hardest part.
Oh, yeah.
Getting people to know you exist is a huge thing. And a lot of times, if you have the marketing and the agent and the manager and the attorney, it's a lot easier if you have the money. But just doing it from a grassroots aspect, you don't. But you have that passion, and I love how far you can take that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the thing is no matter how far, when you're starting something ground pound, like even with my books, like I have 1 million views on my Super Nintendo books or on my Nintendo book, and there's still people out here like, oh my god, I didn't even know you were doing this. Like, it's like the gaming community, the collectors community, everything is so large that it's a passionate project, and you have to try to get out there as much as possible. And that goes hand in hand with the newer NES games. I don't know if people are realizing this, but there are people that have been out there, even Memblers over here sitting in the audience, has been making games since 2002. That's insane. And putting together my NES Oddities book, I'm going down a crazy microcosm, and I wanted to cover all the homebrew games. This has been the hardest thing I've ever had to research. The NES Homebrew scene is available like on hundreds and hundreds of different websites. It's madness. And there's literally about 527 games that are in my book. 527. Does anybody know how many NES games are released licensed for the NES? 768. So we're getting towards the point where the homebrew scene is going to become larger than the licensed NES scene.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
I never thought about that.
Now, the key is, though, in my book, I cover everything. So I'm covering that Memblers put out a demo back in 2003 that was trying out some different coding thing. That's not necessarily a full game. So what I need to do is distinguish between the Mega Man, Castlevania, Mario Brothers level games that do exist in the homebrew scene. There are your Haunted Halloween 85, 86, which they have a booth out there.
Sick.
There's Battle Kid Fortress Apparel, which is like a Mega Man style game where you get killed in one death. There's Legends of Alia. There's this there's this game Mystic Searches that's coming out that's like the Legend of Zelda with jumping and abilities. There are really huge games coming out. But then there's your arcade style games. There's guys porting games for the NES, porting old school Famicom games that we didn't play, and they're porting new games like Frogger and things. I know you have a lot to say about that guy.
Yeah, so that's what's cool too, because there's all the things that weren't released for the NES that you kind of wish were, which kind of goes into two things. You have your things that were on Famicom, like Crazy Climber, Choplifter,
Galaxian,
Dig Dug. So it's all those classic arcade ports that you like. Why didn't they put that on the NES? And just for some reason,
they did.
The Japanese definitely did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the ones that just weren't released at all, like the original Defender, you know, your Robotron type thing, because they have a Smash TV for the NES.
And there is a Robotron that somebody's working on as a homebrew, though, that they've recently completed on NESDev. Yeah.
And that's where it gets cool, because it's almost completing the collection, so we're rounding out the collection
So we can play everything now as an NES gamer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have, your 7800 and the ColecoVision, and those were great ports of, your Frogger and your stuff like that, but you don't have on the NES, so it's just all in one place.
And now Keihan Games released a few years back Ultimate Frogger Championship Edition, where you can actually play 2-player Battle Frogs and play through the game and compete versus each other in Frogger, and he upgraded all the graphics. And it's something that we wanted as gamers back in the day. Now talented programmers are making that a reality.
Yeah, so and it's almost like you can take a passion as far as you want to take it. That's the other thing. As long as you do it for yourself, it doesn't matter. It's all in you, know, and as long as you're having fun. So if there was a game you always wanted to make or a port you always wanted to do, you can do that if you decide to take it that far.
Yeah. The issue with that, though, of course, and as Memblers and other people that have created games, programming on the NES is ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
The learning that processor, programming and assembly. Fortunately, there's a lot of tutorials available online to help people get their feet in the door, but to actually make something presentable is a very large task. I have a programming background myself, and I can get something to move around on a screen, but to go and make something that's legitimately playable, not even a memorable experience like some of these guys are doing, is near impossible. And I highly commend everything everybody's doing when they put out a game, no matter how crazy or microcosm it is.
Yeah.
I enjoy every single one of them. And that's the thing now. So in 2017, we can get brand new NES games to play in our NES. That's ridiculous to me. Last year, there were over 30 games released in 2016 for the NES. Just the NES. And this is going on in every gaming system. There's a game Henshin Engine for the PC Engine that they're making. There's guys in the Turbo Room demoing that off.
Yeah.
And they're going to do an NES port that they told me about for my NES book. It's insane.
Yes.
And I've been told about a lot of games coming out that I'm excited for the NES. Now, other systems have their own different programming woes and difficulties and everything too. The NES, though, has a huge community support, so it's a good way to get your foot in the door when you want to get into it. Because you have a lot of people like Memblers and other people to pick their brain.
Yes.
For real.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing, but you're also, when you're doing this, you're getting this new game in 2017, you're starting a new gaming nostalgia. So you're keeping the NES alive, and that's where people are telling me, sure, if we're just rekindling our nostalgia on Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, in 30 years, okay, I can see us teetering off. But I'm getting brand new games every month. Like, there's no way that it's going away at that point. Like, it's just going to keep going, and maybe 30 years from the last NES Homebrew, maybe I'll be done. That might never happen, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, Kyle. So the thing is that what I want to do is pick people's brains. Is anybody aware of NES Homebrews? Do you have any stories of playing new Nintendo games? And then I want to go into what we want to see out of a really cool NES game. Because if any homebrewers watch this panel, I want them to get ideas from the crowd here, the microcosm of people that come to these conventions and are interested in it. So if anybody raise your hand, go ahead. You can come up here too and chat. But I want Kyle to tell, what do you want to see off of your perfect NES game?
Well, the Haunted Halloween, 85 and 86, is really great because you have it's your classic platformer, side scroller, which, you know, we all carved our teeth back in the day. That was just how it was. So it's great that those exist, and obviously your Zelda's the full immersion, full imaginative immersion, like Legends of Alia, stuff like that. Yeah, that's amazing. And it's kind of what I'm thinking in my head too when you mentioned how it's all new again. So it kind of takes me back to where in the 80s and the early 90s where we didn't have the online resources to figure things out. So you'd have to reach out to Memblers and pick his brain,
For real?
Yeah. So it's kind of starting all over again, and then when everything gets figured out, all the resources are out there, and it's real easy, but that whole process is very long and arduous, and takes a lot of work and a lot of passion from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's where that passion is really important, just to have it, and always make sure you have fun, and you're not burning yourself out. Exactly. I think that's the thing with the project, too, when people start a project and they think it'll be successful right away, and nowadays, I mean, there's so much that exists that just to bubble up through all that is so hard.
Yeah.
So you really just have to do it on your own for yourself. If something good happens, great.
Go with it.
Yeah, if it doesn't, great. But I do think if you do follow, your passion, you will figure it out eventually. You will get a chance, And the whole thing with the programming too, like John Romero, I think Doom was like his 200 or 300th game or something. So that was just how he saw it. Yeah. This is just my 200th game or whatever. But he also said when you start programming, you program with the Pong or something very basic. And the next game, you kind of take what you've learned and you use that for the next game and so forth. So by the time you've done 50 or 100 games, you've learned everything from the progress of doing all the other ones. Yeah. And that's a big part of it too. So again, it comes down to not giving up and just kind of doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the best games that would be great for nowadays would be your ports that don't exist, your classic platformers, the overhead. I mean, just really anything. I mean, because, yeah. Just as long as you can feel the love from it.
Yeah.
I think that's what made a game great in the first place.
Yeah.
Is you could feel that someone really cared and put the time into it.
Yeah.
And that translates so well. So I think really just anything that you could feel that from.
For real. Yeah, and I think the hardest part that we're going to find, and I got you right now, man. The hardest thing you're going to find right now with the homebrew scene is you're going to have things that are going to be put on a cartridge because the tech is so cheap now to do it that literally that guy who just got into programming that's working on his Pong clone is going to get a cart release now. And then his next game, when it gets better, and his next game, when it gets better, are going to get releases. So it's hard as a collector or as a normal gamer that isn't hardcore into the scene to get used to this new homebrew thing when the quality can vary from programmer to programmer because you don't have a Konami, you don't have a Capcom in there going and putting out games as a team. The teams are starting to come around. You got your Retrotainment, as Kyle mentioned with Haunted Halloween. They have a team. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm awake! But you have teams now that are starting to program these games, which is really cool from that aspect. But then you have your individual programmers that are going to reach out to somebody to learn how to program too. So is your microphone work? Give it a test. It does. All right, so go ahead, man. What do you want to see out of a Nintendo game? Tell us your story.
I would like to see.
You got to go really close, man.
Like backports, like Link to the Past, or even Ocarina of Time, but done in Nintendo version.
So you would like to see a game like Link to the Past that downgraded a D-Make.
Yeah.
So are you tracking that there are a few D-Makes that were made out of China that have gotten U.S. releases?
Final Fantasy VII, right?
So A Link to the Past was released on a Famicom cartridge.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten a translation yet that I'm aware of, but it is pretty playable for being that it was a giant game with multiple buttons put on a NES controller.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, and then Final Fantasy VII was put on an NES cartridge, given an English remake, and some talented programmers took all of the code and redid all the graphics in the game. And people have put that on an NES cartridge. So that's not a homebrew, though. That is a bootleg, aftermarket bootleg from China that went on and moved into a translation and a hack of a game that's a D-Make. It's a crazy microcosm when you're talking about collecting. So that's the kind of the things that I'm working on in my oddities book, is I have the homebrew section, but then I have Famicom games that don't require Japanese to enjoy.
Right.
I have my PAL exclusives, the unlicensed games, the international unlicensed games, which are different. You have your sections and your crazy glukes and crazy games. And like I'm going down and I'm splitting it up by different sections, because if you just want to collect Play Choice 10 games, I got them in there. If you just want to go through the homebrew section, I have the homebrew section split by digital only, physical, limited editions. Like I have limited edition games that I brought with me here that may be sold out by the time I get to my table. I got those limited edition NES games. And then you got games coming up, because I want to try to future-proof the book. Since there's 30 games coming out a year, 30 plus games, I want to try to future-proof it. But like, there's so many different ones. So when you mentioned like you want to see D-Makes, I would love to see some homebrewers do some D-Makes of some games. It would be amazing.
Yeah,
there's also a Biohazard. Somebody did Resident Evil on the NES.
Yeah.
Like, there's crazy stuff that's out there. And it's crazy knowing about some of that stuff. Like, when you want to know. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, yeah, what's interesting when I think about that, the controller scheme would be the hardest thing, I think.
Yeah.
Because everything else is acceptable because you're expecting something D-made. You're not expecting something better than what it was.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, like, all the buttons that were on the SNES, and then it goes to the NES, which was such a basic thing. It's kind of like the Commodore 64. Like, if you play a game like Usagi Yojimbo, you gotta press up and attack button to do a move. You gotta press left and attack button to do another move. Right and attack button to do another move. And that's what people didn't like about your Conan or those NES games that were kind of based off your Commodore 64 games.
Yeah, basically ports.
Yeah, and so I think that's the hard part about that is now we're going back to where you had a smaller controller and less to work with. That's when you really got to get creative.
Yeah. So you basically set me up, which I like. So there's a new game on Kickstarter, Spookatron, which is actually a twin-stick shooter. Like you mentioned, Robotron. He's doing his own version, and he's actually in the Nintendo Age room demoing it off today. And he actually is using 3 control schemes for the game. So number one, you can take 2 NES controllers and use 2 D-pads and play through the game and use one for the movement, one for the shots. He's also doing, with Memblers, who's sitting over here, a Super Nintendo controller adapter. So you can use a Super Nintendo controller with it and use the 4-button scheme for the shooting, so you can do the up, down, left, right.
So there you go.
So you got that, and then what his initial idea was to use a Virtual Boy controller, which he's rewiring and showing how you can rewire it and use both of the D-pads from the Virtual Boy controller to make it work. And those are the creative things that we're seeing with the NES homebrew games that blow my mind. Is when you see the different people that get creative. Like you got a guy in there showing off a game that's called Tailgate Party, and you literally can play with an NES Power Pad and throw beanbags on there and it registers. And it's not cornhole because there's multiple scoring possibilities as you play. You get 1, 2, and 3 points. So it's a completely new dichotomy to a game, which is ridiculous to me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just taking something that you always wanted, like what the whole initial question, and then turning it into reality.
Yeah.
And we were playing that last night with the beanbags, and it's perfect. It's a way to use the power pad, because the power pad, there's so much to be unlocked with that if you think about it. Like, nowadays, when do we ever break out the power pad and, Never. So it's like, let's come up with the thing to make that useful. I just love that.
Yeah.
That's where the passion takes people.
I mean, and you got to think about it, that is a complete passion project. Because if you're going through and trying to mass market an NES Power Pad game, how many people out there that don't have a Nintendo anymore are going to have a Power Pad too? Like, and you got to find the Power Pad. So you're literally, all the passionate people that are collecting Nintendo, those are the people you want to play your game.
Yeah.
I mean, unless he figures out a way to make his own Power Pad, which we were talking about last night over beers, because we were like, hey, well, what about this and this and this? And that's the unique thing and the really cool thing about the new NES Revolution that's going on, is that we can literally sit here and pick the brains of these passionate people that are here. You can go talk with the Haunted Halloween guys in the Cellar Tent. You can go to the Nintendo Age Room and find like 7 or 8 different programmers and find out like what drives them. Why are they doing it? And maybe you can figure out your own way to start your own passion projects or whatever. It kickstarts you into what you like to do. And it's crazy. It's the most interactive thing I've ever done in video games with the homebrew stuff. And it's really addicting because it's really cool to see and get new gaming experiences. Some of the guys will send you a full completed box with the manual game when you get it too, and you just get it and you can add it to your shelf. They make it just like the original NES games. It's really cool. So I mean, that's the thing that's crazy about the NES homebrew stuff. So what do you think about for me, talking about a game we would like to see, all right, on there. So, obviously we'd like to see a new Metroidvania, Castlevania. Those are coming out. There's people working on those.
Amazing.
There's a Pyronaut coming out. There's a game called Epicade that's coming out that's more action-oriented, Metroidvania-style exploration. But what I want to see is a Twitch platforming action game, Ninja Gaiden style. I want to see it so you can just run through it and mash the buttons and go through, and it's ridiculously difficult to play. I want one of those faster-paced games. That's what I want, because like a game like Haunted Halloween, you got your combos and things. It still has a pacing to it. It's a River City Ransom style pacing to it. But there's platforming in it.
Yeah.
So it's its own thing.
Yeah.
But I want to see a faster-paced action game like we had back in the day with crazy parallax scrolling, and I want it all. Why not?
Yeah,
I mean, if we're shooting for the moon, I might as well go right over it, right?
That's a good one. Yeah, and
It's kind of like that Donkey Kong Country thing where once you have the level in your head and you can just fly through it, it just feels so good. It's almost like an unwinding at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You just turn on the game and just blaze through it. I don't think there really is one right now that's really a fast-paced ninja type.
No.
It doesn't have to be ninja, but,
Yeah.
or a little, like a combat type. I think the deal with that, too, you got to make the enemies like one-hit deaths type thing where, so you can run through it.
Yeah.
So, and as far as Battle Kid, that even has a sequel now.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
crazy.
the closest. Yeah, Battle Kid would be the closest, and Battle Kid, the original Battle Kid Forces of Peril, was released in 2010, so 7 years ago.
Jeez.
And that one literally is one-hit deaths. You die in one hit. It was based on I Want to Be the Guy, which was a Windows-based game. And basically he made it off of that, but did it NES style with Mega Man style sprites. But what I like about that game is when you're going through, you hit checkpoints. So, like, you can go through about 5 or 6 screens, you're dying a bunch of times, but then you hit that checkpoint, you're like, oh, thank God. And then you get to the boss battle and it kills you in a second. And then you gotta go back. But it is fast-paced, because once you learn it, you do have that memorization piece where you can just fly through levels.
Right.
And I've seen people go through and no-death run the game now. And 2 years later, they released Battle Kid 2. And since then, I think Savak is in Japan, so he's working a full-time job. I think he's been incorporated with some other games.
Cool.
So here's another thing with new Nintendo, and anybody can come up again. They'll probably bring up a microphone again, maybe make it pop in my ears, but that's okay. But what do you think about people buying old rights to the older games and re-releasing them now? You got companies like Pico Interactive that put out a NES, was like the Wisdom Tree style Bible games on a controller, but he bought the licenses legally and he's putting out new games. Or people buying out the licenses to those unreleased games that the ROMs of online and giving it a full cartridge release legally. What do people think about that? You can come up and talk about that too, and we'll talk about get Kyle Fuchsius over here to tell us his theories.
Yeah, and really with the Arc System works too, how they bought the IP from Technos and came out with Double Dragon 4.
True.
And a lot of people actually don't know that Double Dragon 4, the people who worked on it were the original designers and the original people who did it. So that's another one to definitely check out. It's kind of how it progresses.
Yeah, well, and that obviously, Double Dragon 4 is obviously on PS4 and Steam, not NES. However, they completely went with the NES graphics, NES playstyle, and there are new age Double Dragon Neon. So they already have the newer style one. Now they went back and gave us our NES one. And the thing is we can break the world record drinking beers on the weekend. We might try it this weekend here in Nintendo Asia and just try to break the world record again, drunk, and then maybe put it on the scoreboard because I think they got the Power Pack scoreboard going. So we might try to do that this weekend. We've done it before, but we've never recorded it, so we need to do that. But Double Dragon 2 is our gold medal game. And so Double Dragon 4 came out, and we're like, holy cow, we had to play it. And it really is like made for somebody who's obsessed with Double Dragon 2 and like 3 and 1, and they just threw it all into one crazy amalgamation. It's a really cool game.
Yeah, and that dovetails
I'll
into...
bring you up a mic. I'll come down to you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so on the re-releasing of old stuff, I think that's awesome, right? Because stuff that was made back in the day, right? You get a chance to actually experience that. One of the problems with the newer games is that they tend to have newer sensibilities, right? The way that the game is designed based on all this history of games that we've had all along. But games from back in the day, they were designed with those sensibilities. So if you're looking for the real feel of an 80s game, it had to have been made in the 80s, right?
Oh, you got my mind moving.
So,
yes.
No, that'd be cool. Now, on your earlier question, the type of games I'd like to see more of, and I haven't looked too much into the homebrew scene yet, but more Zapper games. I love this. I freaking want more Zapper games.
Right. Yeah, there actually aren't that many Zapper games.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There are a couple, but they're really just mini games. They're not a full Zapper game like we want. And you really think they could really flesh out a Zapper game now, knowing all of the sensibilities and everything that's come along. You really could. And that is something that we've never covered. So what about that, Kyle? The newer sensibilities that we know now, growing up and being mature, it's like having Yoda come in now and knowing everything and coming in and programming, whereas when you're programming holistically and fresh back in the day. It's the same thing with some of my covers. You get my NES cover by the guy who did Garbage Pail Kids from his nostalgic history, whereas I have an upcoming cover that was actually painted in 1994, and it has a completely different feel to it. I 100% understand that, and that might be something why a lot of these homebrew games might not hit that niche that you quite want, whereas an unreleased game like Ultimate Journey that has never been released on a ROM yet, when that comes out and it's a platformer, it's going to feel like it was programmed in the 90s.
Yeah. And the thing with the Zapper too, so let's take how they made the power pad with the cornhole.
Yeah.
So what could you do with the Zapper that, okay, so you shoot stuff, but thinking in a whole nother way, there's like a uncharted territory.
Again, you're setting me up, Kyle. So on Kickstarter, there actually was a game. It's not a Zapper game, but it uses the Zapper. It's called Super Russian Roulette. And you actually literally play Russian roulette versus people, and there's a guy on the screen that's a cowboy, and he talks smack with vocals and says, "All right, partner, shoot." And you can literally, like, you're playing it, and you don't need to have a CRT because you're not shooting at the TV. You're just playing Russian roulette. There goes the phone. Grab it. All right, so but you literally do that. You pass it around. Now, the funny thing is he has bonuses on it to where he has like a little teddy bear on the screen. You can shoot his teddy bear and he'll shoot you. Or you can do a fire ring and shoot at him. But if you don't have a CRT, you can still play the game.
That's huge.
So that's something new
huge.
that somebody's using.
You can still do something.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a classic Zapper game where you're going out and shooting like a Hogan's Alley or something too. Yeah. So like I want both dichotomies. I want something new and something old. Now, there is a game that I saw that was cool that utilized multiple accessories. It's called 8-Bit Hero Trainer. And while I've been researching the homebrew section, it utilizes the power pad to walk. So you walk on it through a first-person style perspective. You use the power glove to block and swing a sword and block with a shield.
There's something else you can do.
And he recompiled and decomposed everything to do with the power glove, because everyone knows that power glove was literally so bad. It wasn't bad, it was bad, it didn't work well. But he refigured out the microcosms that made the Nintendo Power Glove work and the power pad work, and made it work now with a game, and it actually works perfectly. So literally when you see a screenshot, it looks like a slime from like Dragon Warrior that you're fighting, and then you swing your sword to attack him, put up a block to block him when he's attacking, and then you can like move out of the way and stuff on the power pad in real life. It's really crazy. And the only stuff that I could find without getting stuff from the developer was one video of him playing it in his house, like marching and walking on it with like full gear on. He actually had a full Nerf sword too that he was using with it. It was hilarious. It was awesome. And that's something that you never would have thought. It's an interactive game for the Nintendo. It's something that they could have done back in the day.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy. Like, you could literally do that. And there's other accessories that have been untapped and unutilized, like the U-Force.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because we actually know a dude, he could beat Ninja Gaiden 3 with the U-Force. So, it's just interesting how when you play it, you think it's bad, but then someone else sees it and they're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just how different minds see things differently, or even how you grow. I mean, every day we change a little bit, we're growing a little bit. And, you know, we get into new stuff year after year. Kind of progress through our lives. But yeah, I mean, it's really crazy to think how much untapped there is with all the accessories too. I mean, geez.
So what I'm really excited about, though, is to see the people with these new IPs that are coming out. You have your Sydney Hunter from Collector Vision, where they do a bunch of ColecoVision games, and they're doing a Super Nintendo game, but they're also doing an NES port of the game. And then you have Mega Cat Studios that's putting out literally 30 games. They wouldn't even tell me about all their games. I'm like, I'm doing a book where I'm putting upcoming games. They're like, well, we don't want to put out everything just in case, like, you know, they don't come out or something. But they're doing games from every different genre. They're doing a Windjammer style game where you're doing it like top down. They're doing a bunch of craziness. They're doing one called Almost Hero that is kind of like Double Dragon. So that's pretty cool, but you're like ninjas in the game, and you can literally power up like an RPG, kind of like, you know, River City Ransom too. But then you're powering up your actual kick speed and your actual punch speed. And when you fight enemies, they're like, one's based on a Ninja Turtle, one's based on a Battletoad that literally zooms at you. Like, it's hilarious. The game is really cool. So it's cool though because they changed all the names so that way it's fair use. So they don't use the Battletoads, they use like it's something else, it's a different name. It's a funny little name aspect on the game. So it's like the creativity that these homebrew developers are able to put in these games is like awesome to me.
Yeah, and the whole fan service aspect. So when we were going through it, it was being created like Turtles, you know. It was a new show at the time, and we were watching it as kids. But now, so that's the one thing where that you can't get now is now we can almost do a fan service to all the old school people who love that stuff. You can create a new game that's just based on fan service, just all old school stuff. I guess the key is the IP and, you know, making it so you don't get sued or anything like that. But other than that, I mean, that's what's cool about now. So now you're catering to people who we all grew up in that time, and that's like a warm resonance with us.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And the other thing is and why we like to have people come up and tell their stuff is like, we like to hear the stories. Because half of the thing that's really cool about these conventions, what's cool about the communities, is hearing the stories and why. And that's why I have my collector books, but I also have my compendiums that are from stories from the contributors that are supporting my books too, and people in the communities, people that were ingrained in it. Like I had Thor Ackerland, who won the NWC, do an article, but then I had another guy who just loved playing a certain game on the Nintendo, and he tells his story. So my Super Nintendo compendium, and I do it graphically too. So you have all of that nostalgia you were talking about, where I'm showing all the artwork. I contact all the artists to see if like I can use it, or if they want credit, or however they want, and then we throw in giant, huge spreads on it, and that adds to their story. And my thing is, I don't give any limitations. So with my new Nintendo compendium, like it's on BackerKit right now from my NES Oddities, there's a Nintendo compendium, because I didn't do that with my first NES book. So I keep on getting like, well, what do I put in there? Like, tell your story, man. That's all I want to hear. Like, what's your limitation? There are no limitations. I want to hear the coolest thing ever. Like, that's just it. And then what I do is I hit in those microcosms of your Final Fantasy VIIs and your other stuff on the NES that aren't in my other books or don't fit a category. So your ROM hacks, like your Zelda Outlands, the stuff that people are literally putting in as much time as some of these programmers making new games, they're modifying existing IPs and making a new Super Mario Bros. As Super Mario 3 mix.
Yeah, that's a huge
like, that stuff is really cool too, and that's another reason why the NES isn't going to go away. We're constantly getting new content. Always. We're always getting new content. I don't know if there's any repro sellers here at the convention, because I know they kind of frown upon making reproductions here.
Yeah.
But if there are, those are brand new games that people took their blood, sweat, and tears to make as well. As long as those developers and creators give the okay to utilize it publicly, that's awesome. And then you get to play it in your NES, which is insane, being able to play somebody's creation on the actual system.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said, emulation versus playing in a console. Because I really feel like playing it in the real NES, living that nostalgia like you played it back in the day on a CRT and everything. I have my own PVM that I got, and I use the professional video monitor with everything, so it has the perfect little thing, but it's still the same input lag. It's still everything like when I played the games back in the day. Instead of putting it on a new TV, and then you're just dealing with the new microcosms that have came out with the newer tech and everything, and then it doesn't feel the same. It's like you're on ice skates.
Yeah.
And the whole, how the NES is just going to keep going. The best analogy is Doom, for PC, the old first-person shooter. So that's still around. That still hasn't gone anywhere. People are coming up with new stuff, new levels, and new ways to take. There's like one where the map has like upside-down rooms. So someone made like a chair that's upside down. So you have where someone just wants to take what they have in their mind and just keep it advancing.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's interesting about why certain people are interested in, the NES or Doom or whatever, as opposed to something else. I don't know, it just kind of catches fire.
It's a Minecraft thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally like the Minecraft style thing where you can create it in your own image. And I think that's where they're taking the NES too, is that you can literally morph the game and code it to however you want. And then though, not only are you creating a game, but you're creating a game that's added to the legacy and the library of the Nintendo Entertainment System, which is something that we've all dreamed about as kids, wanting to make our own game. People are literally able to do that now, add it to that collection, make it part of that lineage and that legacy. And that is really cool to be able to do that. Like, to be a part of that, and now you have a cartridge that you can play alongside and put on the shelf alongside Super Mario Bros. If somebody wants to, if somebody likes your game enough.
That's yours,
Dude,
yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's an amazing thing. And that's the cool thing about this world that we live in now, is we have people that if you're passionate enough, you can create content. You can do videos, you can do a podcast, you can write books, you can program a game. No matter what you do, if you're passionate about it, you show the passion and love that we all show into it, people are also going to be interested because you feel that passion.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool thing. And getting out there and coming out and interacting is the most important part because it's just fun. It's a really cool thing. And then now I come out here, and now I get to go play Spookatron tonight and learn about a new game and get to play other games that like the tailgate party, but you get to play it with the guy who programmed it.
That's the cool thing.
That's the cool
That's
thing.
crazy.
That's
Yeah.
the cool thing, man.
Yeah, you can meet all the people, and everyone is just so great in the community because they all share that same level of passion, and that's what's great too. You reach out to people like over at the tables over there. Someone's like, "Oh, you want to do a podcast?" And the guy's like, "Sure." Like, he didn't even think twice.
Yeah.
Everyone is just so involved and so actively ready, and that's where that passion creates more passion.
Yeah.
And it'll never die.
No.
As long as we hold it within our hearts.
I really think that as long as passionate individuals continue to do new things with it in unique ways, including games, including making physical books, including doing podcasts and over-analyzing things like we do, or going over things and interviewing people on the history of it like other podcasts do, it's a really cool aspect, and it keeps people engaged and interested. And I think that's really the end result, is that we just like to show how much we love the NES and the Super Nintendo. I love the TurboGrafx 16. I love the Neo Geo. I love arcades and pinball machines. Our goal this weekend is to play every single arcade machine over there and get some playtime in every single game. So that way, when we do our Midwest Gaming Classic roll-up, we can talk about what the new experience is in an arcade now. Because this is literally playing the arcade minus the smoky dinginess. And this is literally that aspect now. So we get everybody passionate, playing the games. You're gonna have the loud sounds, the music. It's awesome, and that's how these conventions really, I think, shape our new nostalgia.
Yeah. And creating anticipation for yourself and interest to do something that we might not play all the arcade games, but like just if it was me and you hanging out, but we want to know what they're all like because the knowledge is good for us as far as on a podcast, so we can make analogies and comparisons and stuff like that. So it's almost like how I was doing with the VHS, like taking tapes that were never released, making sure that they get saved on digital transfer. That's just another reason to watch the movie again too. That's the funny thing about it. Like you're giving yourself another reason to go through that and realize why you love it in the first place.
And you hit the nail on the head. It's like a historical aspect. It's one of those things where, like with my Super Nintendo book, there hasn't been one that holistically covered every single game. So like I was like, well, that doesn't even exist. The NES Homebrew thing, that's been the hardest thing I've had to research ever because you have to go to a million different websites to find a million different things, and half the time you don't find the information, so I have to get a hold of the person. And then literally they're like, oh yeah, I have these other 17 games that I worked on too. And it's like, I just got done formatting the book. Let me reformat the entire book and spend another, week reformatting the book. Like, it was insanity. It was to the point now where I cut it off and I'm like, all right, so I have my upcoming releases, and then after that I have more games that were released since I finished the upcoming releases. Like there's like another 6 games that were announced or released. And there's like a ridiculous microcosm. I'm thinking that we're hitting near our time, so we should say where to find us. So everything that we have that's available for VGBS, we tend to get off the beaten path. We were pretty good today. We tend to get off the beaten path, go down the river, as we say, and just talk about random stuff. But we're on HagensAlley.com. That's also where you can find all my books. All of my books are available online. I have a few available that are left. People were selling or buying them yesterday while I was drinking beer. I appreciate every single thing. Like the support, even if one person enjoys what I'm doing, I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm here doing this as a hobby, just like everybody else. Everybody else is doing it. This is my passion project. Podcast is our passion project. Kyle's the mastermind behind the podcast. The podcast wouldn't exist without Kyle. Like, he's the guy who does all the editing and all the hard work behind that. He literally makes it sound like professional style audio. Like, I'm recording the audio side over here too, just in case, so that way we can start the editing quicker. And then he's going to utilize whatever they give us and put a real shine on it and use musical intros and craziness and so we're available there. We have stuff available all over the place. We're on all the different podcasting apps as well for VGBS. My latest book, NES Oddities and the Homebrew Revolution, as well as the Nintendo Compendium, are still on BackerKit. You can get it from HagensAlley.com. You can get to the link. You could also go to the Kickstarter page that I had. It goes to a link to it. You can go right to it. If you contribute still, you can still put your story in the book for the NES Compendium, because until I release the NES Oddities, I haven't started on the Nintendo Compendium. But those books do not take that long because I'm literally writing somebody else's story. I read the story and build those spreads off the story, the nostalgia, as I read it. And that's why I love reading. I don't want to dictate what they do. I write your story. I want to put it in there. Like one guy was writing about Mortal Monday and the Super Nintendo one. So I put the Mortal Monday ads and had a cool background with Daniel Pacina and some of the guys that are walking around here at the bar from the Mortal Kombat guys. Doing some cool stuff with it. Just having really fun with it and making it feel like an old school ad. And that's what I like to do too, is make it feel like you're in the old magazines.
I love that.
Yeah, and I'm doing year-by-year gaming too, like 90, 91. Just trying to do a bunch of cool stuff, and as long as people are supporting, I'm gonna keep going and high quality, represent and having a good time.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any crazy questions if we got some time? Come on, go ahead.
I got one crazy question. I really loved your talk, and we got one of your cartridges yesterday.
Oh.
Could you autograph it, please?
Nice.
Oh, absolutely. So the background behind that card is MilesCon 2016, right?
Yes, it is.
Bad Bitch Edition.
Only 10 editions.
So last year, there was a guy here. He was sitting here in the audience, blitzed out of his mind. Went against some of the security guards that are real cops in real life, just off duty, being security here, and came onto the guy, tried to squeeze on the guy, doing crazy stuff. got arrested, got banned permanently from Midwest Gaming Classic.
That's hard to do.
That's hard to
That's
do.
hard to do.
Hard to do. You see some crazy people out here. And so I told the story. Miles has one of those 10. It's about him. He has one of those cartridges. But I like to do something cool, and that's literally a choose-your-own-adventure game.
Yeah, we should go into that.
That is the story of that on a cartridge, which has never been done. Nobody's done a Zork on the Nintendo. So this is literally like, you don't have an option. You do have to drink a half gallon of vodka to progress in the game. But you get to choose if you want to go after that cop or not to try to not get arrested. So the goal is to not go to jail. So that's the classicness. And what I did is that is the kind of the prototype or the proof of concept, because I want to work on a choose-your-own-adventure series, going the twisted realities of NES Homebrew games, and you can literally get transported into the world of Haunted Halloween or Battle Kid or something like that. And I'm going to create this whole quantum leap mentality with a whole story, and then it works with, it gets the names of those homebrew developers out there as well. And I can go really deep and far. And one of the talented programmers in the NES community created the backbone programming for this for me. So I can literally make a series out of it, which I think is really cool. And that's just going to be the extra stuff. Like, I'm not going to do a Homebrew NES game series. I'm going to do the book series, and then when I take it to a crowdfunding, I'll put that for anybody who wants to jump down that rabbit hole with me. They can go ahead and get that game too. And I'll absolutely sign the game. Absolutely. Just hit us up here, because I think we're going to get the dirty look here. I think we're going a little bit over. That's what we always do. he said, man.
Cool, we got 5.
He said, man. We got 5. All right. So yeah. So going with that, like, I just am going to continue to do those, but I'm just working on that on the side. I'm also working on a project. As soon as I finish the NES Oddities, I'm working with the legendary Walter Day.
Oh, yes.
And I'm working on categorizing his Twin Galaxies card series. And he wants me to start with his first year. But here's the thing, though. I don't just want a checklist of all the cards like we're doing with the checklist for the games. I want the stories. So I'm going to contact every single person that's gotten a card from that year, get their stories on it, and I want to get the stories in there. So I never make anything easy on myself. Right. Like, that's going to be a ridiculous project trying to get a hold of Nolan Bushnell and Tommy Tallarico and a bunch of crazy people in the community. But I'm going to try. And if they want to tell their stories, I'm going to do a full-page spread on it. And I think that'll be another cool project. And I'm doing that for Walter. Walter's done so much for the community. Like, I'm doing that for Walter. Like, I'm not selling the books. Walter's selling the books. I'm just doing it for him. And the thing is I'm going to continue to reach out to artists. And if you're an artist, if you do anything within gaming, just hit me up. And, you know, I have business cards, and I'll talk with everybody because, I mean, it's all about the passion. We got to keep the passion alive. Got any final words, Kyle?
Yeah, the whole choose your own adventure is cool too, because you don't have to code like Konami or Capcom or anything. You can actually just come up with a cool story and make something a reality. So there's a multitude of ways for everyone to contribute to the whole community.
Yeah. Yeah, and with my Twisted Reality series, it's going to be a combination of a Choose Your Own Adventure and the Worlds of Power. So Worlds of Power back in the day, there were 10 books. There was a Blaster Master one that went so crazy into the story that it actually became canon in the Blaster Master Zero that just came out on the Nintendo Switch. Which is awesome. So it's some crazy stuff. But anyways, thank you everybody for coming to listen to us BS about NES. I appreciate it. We get a good round of applause and everything, and we're going to have our next speaker. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Woo.
And there you go. That's the end of this week's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did with the VGBS Gaming Podcast of Jeffrey Wittenhagen and Kyle Gilbert. And that's it. That's the end of the show. Thank you very much for watching and or listening. I appreciate it. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and game on.